Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in Geography. Today we're going to wrap up talking about Western Europe by looking at Southern Europe. So we're going to look at nations like Spain, Portugal, Andorra. We'll get into, of course, Italy and Greece as well today. We'll look at the political and economic geographies. We'll get into culture, and we'll also get, of course, into the physical geography. And so let's kick things off with what we call the Iberian Peninsula. So these would be the nations of Spain, Portugal, and Andorra. And these would be climates that are quite mild. They've got mild winters and hot summers, and they're kept this way certainly with the Sirocco winds that come from northern Africa. Economically, this region typically tends to use strategies and techniques like dry farming to grow things like wheat and vegetables, which of course are staples, especially vegetables, in the Mediterranean diet of a lot of the groups that we'll talk about today. Spain is definitely a world leader in olive oil, and certainly you'll see that with a lot of these Mediterranean economies. And then also certainly Portugal is the world's leading producer of cork, which has several uses, especially in the production of things like olive oil, wine, and others. Tourism also brings millions of people annually to this region for the beaches, the cathedrals, the castles, the history in places like Madrid and Barcelona, and museums, and certainly a very unique and fascinating culture. Manufacturing also has begun to increase, and you see rich deposits of iron ore being found in this region. Government-wise, there's some variety here. Spain would be a constitutional monarchy, so it's definitely more of the parliamentary system, but again, do still have a king and queen, but don't have any real power. Portugal, however, tends to have more of a parliamentary republic. And so there's elements of the parliamentary democracy there, but they're also combined with republic ideas. And so a slight difference between those two. Andorra is a semi-independent principality, and it's kind of co-governed by Spain and France, and certainly kind of has its own semi-independent government, but still needs to receive final approval from, of course, Spain and France. When we look at the people of the Iberian Peninsula, we're looking at a people who are mostly Catholic. Portugal has certainly seen itself as more of a unified culture, primarily because of the Portuguese language. As able to kind of, whether you're in Lisbon or in other cities, you will certainly see that there is a more unified and connected culture. Converse that with Spain. Spain is actually quite multicultural, with many different languages and traditions, including groups like the Basques, but they are all certainly united as one country, but also some of those groups have tried to become independent, and there's a little bit more instability in those countries wanting to express that cultural uniqueness. Moving on to Italy. So we're looking at Italy, Sicily, San Marino, and Vatican City when we're talking about this region. Of course, Vatican City being the smallest country in the world, it's completely surrounded by the city of Rome. When it comes to Italy's physical geography and climate, the Alps are in the north, which would be located right here on the map. The Apennines kind of make up our backbone. You'll find them throughout kind of this eastern portion, but also the center of Italy, and certainly kind of, like I said, kind of form the spine. You'll have San Marino also in this general area as well. Climate-wise, it's pretty mild. Pretty sunny summers, rainy winters. They fall in line with our climate type, more of a traditional Mediterranean climate. And so certainly nothing like what we would have in the northern Midwest. Economically, you've seen a bit of a transition in Italy. Used to be largely focused on agriculture, and you'll still see things like olive oil, wine, other things being produced. In fact, you've had an increased role of organized crime, like the agro mafia, which we'll look at here in class, of trying to counterfeit some of those traditional agricultural practices. But you're starting to see more of a transition to manufacturing, especially in about the last half century, the last 60 years. Italy continues to be a member of the European Union, and of course, tourism is massive in Italy. It brings millions of people every year. Great cities, whether you're going to Venice or Rome or Naples, and I could keep going on, but certainly just to name a couple or name a few. The history here is incredible. When you go to Rome, you can see the Colosseum and other remnants of antiquity. You can see the Roman Forum. You can see pieces of World War II history, certainly. And in Venice, you'll see, the beautiful and unique canals, and there's no cars. And then even in the north, you've got some of the best skiing in the world in the Alps. And so there's certainly a good balance of economic activity in Italy today. Government-wise, you're looking at a democratic republic, with the exception of Vatican City, which, of course, is completely run by the Roman Catholic Church, so that would be more of a theocracy. But lasting stability in Italy has been a challenge since World War II. So without getting into a ton of detail, because we could spend a lot of time talking about Italy's role in World War II, they essentially adopted fascism under Mussolini. Later, Mussolini was overthrown, and Italy adopted more democracy into their government and into their country. But there has been some trouble with stability in that format recently, again, with basically since the war ended in 1945, World War II. People-wise, we're looking at about 60 million people. It's mostly an urban population. I would say about 7 out of every 10 people on average live in urban areas. Manufacturing or service industry by far employ the most people at about 90%. That makes sense with the tourism industry and the increased focus on manufacturing. It's a very Catholic nation. About 95% of people identify as Roman Catholic, which again makes sense given that the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church are in Italy. They, of course, are in Vatican City, which again, own independent nation, smallest nation in the world, housed completely within Rome. So certainly completely surrounded. In some cases, you could call it an enclave. But it's home to the Pope and, of course, the Roman Catholic Church. All right, let's talk about Greece next. So Greece forms the southern tip of what we call the Balkan Peninsula. And we'll learn more about the Balkans when we get into Eastern Europe in our next unit. But certainly bordered by nations like Albania and Bulgaria, just to name a couple. When we look at also certainly what makes up, you've got a series of archipelagos, so chain of islands. There's over 2,000 islands that are included in Greek territory, and about 170 of them, like Mykonos, for example, have people or are inhabited, and Crete is the largest of those islands. One of the least industrialized countries in Europe, still a lot of agriculture. They tend to need to import food and fuel as well as some manufactured goods. Olives and grapes certainly are a big part of the economy, and it's one of the largest shipping fleets in the world. Tourism is, of course, especially important here, especially in and around Athens. So again, a lot of wonderful history located here from ancient Greece. And so whether you're looking at Delphi or Athens or going into where ancient Sparta used to be, you can see a lot of really cool history in Greece. Looking at the people, they're a parliamentary republic, so very similar to Portugal in that way. About 11 million people, 60% urban, so not quite at the level of, say, like in Italy or other nations that we've studied, like, say, Iceland so far. And they are 95% Greek Orthodox. So when the Christian church was originally formed, the original branch is now what we would call the Roman Catholic Church. There was then a split. The first split was called the Great Schism or Great Schism. I've heard both. And that's where the Orthodox Church formed. And there are different branches of the Orthodox Church. There's a Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. So that is the first split in the Christian church. Later on, you've got the Protestant Reformation, where you then have the Protestant branches of Christianity being formed. But that's a little bit later in Germany with Martin Luther. And so certainly Greece has had its fair share of economic challenges in recent history in dealing with its membership in the European Union. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap up this edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in Geography. Check out the check-in quiz here. You've got your options here above and questions below. So take a moment, check that out. For my students, please make sure you've been following along with the guided notes. Ask any questions that you still have. For those of you who just are listening, thank you. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, maybe we gave you some ideas for places to travel to and just maybe a little bit more understanding of some of the geography in Southern Europe. And again, a lot of the very unique cultures that exist here. So that's going to wrap up this edition. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.